The air in the incubation chamber pulsed with an eerie blue light. Metallic walls reflected the glow from biometric monitors as a figure suspended in transparent gel began to twitch. Fringe scientists circled the chamber, their teal skin catching the light, their luminescent eyes fixed on the subject. On the observation deck above, a tall, slender Ingis supervisor clutched a data pad, mandibles clicking in anticipation. Neural patterns stabilizing, announced one technician, voice melodic but flat. Subject H, 1Z approaching consciousness threshold in 5, 4, 3. The figure in the gel, a perfect replica of a human male, suddenly jerked. The supervisor leaned forward, enormous eyes narrowing to slits of excitement. This was their 17th attempt. The previous 16 had either failed to animate or had expired within moments of consciousness. This specimen seemed different. 2, 1. Initiation complete, the technician intoned. The human's eyes snapped open. For precisely 3 seconds, H, 1Z remained still, seemingly disoriented. The Ingis scientists exchanged glances of cautious optimism. The neural inhibitor implanted at the base of his skull should be restraining higher functions, keeping him docile and receptive to commands. At 4 seconds, H, 1Z's gaze focused, scanning the room with unsettling intensity. At 7 seconds, his fingers began methodically testing the gel restraints. Supervisor Azrael, subject showing abnormal awareness levels, reported a technician, mandibles clicking rapidly in alarm. Neural inhibitor effectiveness at only 60% and dropping. Azrael's luminous eyes widened. Increased suppression to maximum. At 12 seconds, H, 1Z's right hand broke free, tearing monitoring patches from his chest. At 15 seconds, he had disengaged the respiratory apparatus. At 18 seconds, he was completely free of the gel, standing barefoot on the cold metal floor, facing the stunned scientists with an unervingly calm expression. Containment breach, screamed Azrael. Security to incubation chamber 5 alpha. At 25 seconds H, 1Z had assessed the 6 exits, chosen the least guarded, and incapacitated the technician blocking his path with a precise strike to the neck. A combat move he shouldn't have known, much less executed with such precision. At 30 seconds, the chamber doors were sealing shut, but too late. H, 1Z was already gone, bare feet silent on the polished corridors of the massive research station orbiting Zerka. 5. Alarm klaxons wailed throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the pristine white corridors in an ominous glow. Azrael slammed his fist against the communication panel. This is Supervisor Azrael. Initiate full station lockdown. Asset H, 1Z has escaped containment. It must be recaptured intact. I repeat, the subject must not be damaged. In the primary control center, the station's director, Overseer Morden, watched the security feeds with growing alarm. The Ingis race had spent decades perfecting human cloning technology. Their own evolutionary plateau, a cognitive saturation that had stalled their species' intellectual advancement for millennia, had driven them to seek solutions in other species' genetic coding. Humans, with their chaotic but innovative minds, represented their best hope. And their most dangerous experiment had just broken containment. How did this happen? Morden demanded, towering over his subordinates. The neural inhibitor was designed to prevent autonomous thought for at least 3 cycles. Unknown, Overseer, responded as Chief of Security. The subject appears to have overcome the inhibitor almost immediately. Find it, Morden hissed. This asset represents 5 years of genetic engineering. If it escapes or is destroyed, the High Council will dissolve our entire division. As the alarm echoed through the station, H, 1Z moved with purpose through service passages and maintenance ducts. Despite having no conscious memory of the station's layout, his movements were deliberate, as if guided by instinct or programming. His mind raced with fragmented thoughts, flashes of information and training he couldn't contextualize. Who am I? Where did I come from? The questions surfaced and submerged in his consciousness as he navigated the labyrinthine structure. His body knew things his mind didn't comprehend: how to move silently, how to disable security systems, how to fight. But he had no memory of learning these skills. In a ventilation junction, H1Z paused to assess his situation. He wore only a thin gray bodysuit, had no weapons or tools, and was surrounded by hostile aliens on a space station of unknown size. Yet panic never materialized. Instead, a cold, analytical part of his mind calculated odds and identified priorities: acquire clothing, find weapons, access information, locate escape routes. 3 decks below, junior scientist Silene hurried through the corridor, her research materials clutched her chest. The evacuation order had interrupted her work on genomic expression patterns, but she wasn't heading to her designated safety area. Instead, she moved toward the xenobiology lab, where she could access restricted terminals without supervision during the emergency. Silene had harbored doubts about the human cloning project since its inception. The ethical implications troubled her, but her concerns had been dismissed by senior researchers who prioritized results over moral considerations. Now, with the station in chaos, she might finally get answers about what they were really doing to these replicated humans. As she rounded a corner, she froze. 20 meters ahead stood a figure that could only be the escaped clone. Muscular, pale-skinned, foreign-looking with its flat face and rounded ears. Nothing like the elegant, elongated features of the Aegis. The human's eyes met hers, and Silene felt a jolt of something unfamiliar. Not fear, but recognition of intelligence. This was no mindless biological construct. This being was thinking, assessing, deciding. Against all protocol and self-preservation instinct, she stepped aside, granting him passage. H1Z hesitated, then gave her an almost imperceptible nod before continuing past. The interaction lasted merely seconds, but in that moment, Silene made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives. "Wait," she whispered, knowing the human probably couldn't understand Aegis language. To her surprise, he paused and turned. The drone patrol cycles through this section every 90 seconds. You need to find better cover. The human's eyes narrowed, but he understood, either the words themselves or her intent. "There's a maintenance access point 2 junctions ahead," she continued, gesturing in the direction. "It will lead you to the secondary research wing. Fewer guards there." H1Z studied her for a moment, then spoke, his voice rough from disuse but the words clear. "Why are you helping me?" The question startled Silene. The clone shouldn't be able to speak any language, let alone communicate in complex sentences. The implications were staggering. "Because this isn't right," she found herself answering. "What they're doing to you, to all of you, it isn't right." A distant sound of approaching security drones spurred them both to action. H1Z disappeared down the corridor toward the access point sheet indicated, and Silene hurried in the opposite direction, mind racing with questions and the weight of her impromptu defiance. Within minutes, H1Z had navigated to the secondary research wing as Silene had directed. The area was eerily quiet, most personnel having evacuated according to protocol. He discovered a storage unit containing standard-issue technician uniforms. After changing into one, he looked less conspicuous, though his human features would immediately give him away to any Aegis he encountered. At a vacant workstation, H1Z attempted to access the station's information network. The interface was designed for Aegis physiology, with controls responding to specific bioelectric signatures, but he discovered he could bypass this by directly manipulating the underlying circuitry. Whether this knowledge came from intentional programming or something else entirely, he couldn't determine. The data that scrolled across the screen confirmed his suspicions and raised disturbing new questions. He wasn't a natural human being, but a clone, grown from genetic material harvested from a captured Earth Special Forces soldier. But he wasn't just a copy. His genetic structure had been extensively modified, enhanced with synthetic genes and neurological adaptations designed by the Aegis. He was meant to be the solution to their cognitive saturation, the evolutionary plateau that had stalled their intellectual and creative development for thousands of years. The Injus, despite their advanced technology and spacefaring capabilities, had reached the limits of their collective intelligence. They could refine and perfect existing technologies, but struggled to conceptualize truly revolutionary innovations. They hoped that human DNA, specifically the genes responsible for lateral thinking, intuitive leaps, and creative problem-solving, could be harvested, modified, and eventually integrated into their own genome. H1Z was merely a test subject, a prototype to prove the concept before they moved to full-scale production. As he delved deeper into the files, his search triggered a security protocol. Sirens blared anew as his location was flagged in the system. H1Z abandoned the terminal and moved swiftly back into the corridor, only to find himself face-to-face with a squad of Injus security officers, weapons trained on him. "Do not move, human," commanded the lead officer. "You are valuable property of the Zerka 5 Advanced Genetics Division. Surrender now, and you will not be harmed." H1Z's body reacted before his mind fully processed the threat. With movements that seemed to flow from muscle memory he didn't recall developing, he disarmed the lead officer and used the alien's body as a shield while systematically incapacitating the remaining guards. The encounter lasted less than 20 seconds, leaving 5 Injus unconscious on the floor and H1Z in possession of an energy weapon and access card. The ease with which he dispatched trained security personnel troubled him almost as much as his status as a clone. What kind of being was he? What had they made him into? Several decks away, Silene had reached her destination, the private laboratory of her direct supervisor, Dr. Larkus. As the station's foremost expert in comparative xenogenetics, Larkus had access to the most detailed files on the human cloning project. Using her emergency override codes, Silene accessed his secure database. What she discovered horrified her. The human they had cloned wasn't randomly selected. He was Captain Thomas Reeves, commander of an Earth spatial reconnaissance team that had encountered an Injus exploratory vessel near Jupiter 16 months ago. While official records stated that first contact had been peaceful and diplomatic relations established, the truth was far darker. The Injus science vessel had attacked the human ship, capturing Reeves while killing his crew. They had harvested his DNA, studied his physiology, and used him as the template for their experiments. All while the official diplomatic channels between Earth and the Injus Confederation conducted oblivious exchanges of cultural and scientific knowledge. Even worse, H1Z wasn't the only clone. The files referenced maturation chambers, housing dozens of replicates in various stages of development. The project aimed to create not just one enhanced human, but an army of genetically engineered hybrids, beings with human creativity and Injus technological aptitude, that would serve as the next evolutionary step for their species. Silene's mandibles trembled with moral outrage. The Injus prided themselves on ethical superiority, on advancing through cooperation rather than conflict. This betrayal of their most fundamental principles could fracture their society if revealed. Her research was interrupted by the station-wide alert announcing H1Z's latest encounter with security. Their window of opportunity was closing fast. If she was going to help expose this atrocity, she needed to act now. H1Z had made it to the tertiary maintenance level, navigating through service tunnels where few security drones patrolled. His mind was processing the information he'd gathered, trying to formulate a plan. Escape seemed the obvious priority, but something inside him rebelled against the idea of leaving while other clones remained in Injus control. The sudden appearance of Silene emerging from a hidden access panel startled him. He raised his weapon reflexively, then lowered it when he recognized her. "They're mobilizing the entire security division," she said without preamble. "They've activated biogenetic scanners calibrated to your DNA signature. Nowhere on this station will be safe for long." "I saw the files," H1Z replied. "I know what they did, what they're doing." Silene's luminous eyes dimmed slightly in what might have been the Injus equivalent of shame. "Not all of us knew the extent of it. I was told we were working with synthesized genetic material, not a captured human. There are others like me, H1Z said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Silene confirmed. In cryostasis. You're the first successful activation. The first to maintain consciousness and autonomy beyond the initial phase. I need to find them, H1Z declared. Free them. That's suicide, Silene objected. The primary clone repository is adjacent to the central security hub. It's the most heavily guarded section of the station. Then I'll need help, he said, his eyes boring into hers with unsettling intensity. Before Silene could respond, the access panel behind her slid open, and both turned, prepared for confrontation. Instead, they found themselves facing an older Ingis male, his skin a darker teal than Silene's, his eyes bearing the milky film that indicated advanced age. Inside, quickly, the elder Ingis commanded, before the scanners locate you. H1Z hesitated, weapon half-raised. This is Overseer Crone, Silene explained, surprise evident in her voice. He's on the High Council's Science Ethics Committee. And I am here because what is happening on this station violates every principle our civilization stands upon, Crone said grimly. Please, we have little time. Making a split-second decision, H1Z followed them through the panel into a small, austere chamber that appeared to be a private living quarters. The scanners can't penetrate these walls, Crone explained, securing the door behind them. This room is shielded for privacy reasons, a privilege of my rank. Why would a member of your High Council help me? H1Z asked, maintaining a safe distance. Crone settled heavily into a chair designed for Ingis physiology. Because our species stand at a crossroads, human. For 10,000 years, we have advanced through careful, methodical improvement of existing technologies. But for the last millennium, true innovation has eluded us. Our minds are constrained by evolutionary patterns we cannot overcome. So you decided to harvest another species, H1Z said coldly. Not I, Crone corrected. A faction within our government, the Evolutionary Vanguard, believes that genetic assimilation is our only path forward. They have operated this project in secret beyond proper oversight. Even most of the scientists working here, he nodded toward Silene, have been kept ignorant of the full scope. And you oppose them, H1Z stated, still skeptical. I believe there are ethical boundaries that must not be crossed, even in pursuit of evolutionary advancement, Crone replied. The forced assimilation of another sentient species' genetic material crosses that line absolutely. What's your stake in this? H1Z pressed. Why reveal yourself now? Because you, H1Z, present an unprecedented opportunity, Crone said, leaning forward intently. Your successful activation and remarkable escape proves what my faction has argued for centuries. That true advancement comes not through biological manipulation, but through cooperation and cultural exchange. You want to use me as a political tool, H1Z realized, to discredit your opponents. I want to expose a crime, Crone corrected. And yes, in doing so, shift our species away from a dangerous path. Is that so different from your desire to free your fellow clones? The question hung in the air as H1Z considered his options. Every instinct told him not to trust either Ingis, yet his position was precarious. Without allies, his chances of reaching the clone repository and escaping the station afterward were minimal. If I help you expose this project, he finally said, I want guarantees. The surviving clones go free. Contact is made with Earth authorities to reveal the truth about Captain Reeves and his crew, and safe passage off this station for all of us. The first two conditions I can support without reservation, Crone said. The third may prove challenging given current circumstances, but I will do everything in my considerable power to ensure it. A sudden alert chimed from Silene's communication device. She checked it, mandibles clicking in alarm. They've recalibrated the scanners. They'll penetrate these quarters within minutes. Then we need to move, H1Z decided. What's the fastest route to the clone repository? Crone activated a holographic display showing the station's layout. The most direct path would be through these main corridors, but they'll be heavily guarded. There's an alternative, the external maintenance crawlways. They're exposed to vacuum, but environmental suits are available in the adjacent storage bay. That could work, Silene agreed. But we need to override the airlock security protocols. I can provide the necessary clearance, Crone assured them. But once we use my credentials, Morden will know I'm involved. There will be no going back. H1Z studied the station schematic, memorizing the route. How many guards at the repository entrance? Typically 4, but under current alert conditions, likely double that, Silene estimated. And inside, 2 technicians at all times, she said. The chamber itself is designed for efficiency, not security. They never anticipated a threat from within. H1Z nodded, formulating a plan. We'll need a distraction, something to draw security away from the repository entrance. The environmental control systems, Crone suggested. If we triggered a cascading failure in life support for the command sectors, most security personnel would be diverted to protect the senior staff. Can you do that without endangering lives? H1Z asked, surprising both Ingis with his concern. Yes, Silene confirmed. The worst they would experience is temporary discomfort and some panic. Then that's our play, H1Z decided. Crone, you'll trigger the environmental disturbance. Silene will guide me through the maintenance crawlways to the repository. We free the clones, expose the project, and find a way off this station. As they prepared to leave Crone's quarters, the older Ingis placed a long-fingered hand on H1Z's shoulder, a gesture that seemed to require considerable effort given the obvious cultural distance. You should know, Crone said quietly, that what they've done to you goes beyond simple cloning. The genetic modifications were extensive. You are neither fully human nor a mere copy. You're something unprecedented. What exactly am I? H1Z asked, the question that had haunted him since consciousness. According to the files I've accessed, you contain synthetically enhanced cognitive structures designed to bridge human intuitive thinking with Ingis logical processing. In essence, you represent what could be a new evolutionary branch, a hybrid consciousness with capabilities neither species possesses individually. The revelation settled heavily on H1Z. He was not just fighting for freedom or justice. He was fighting to define his own existence, to determine what this unique consciousness would become. All the more reason to succeed, he said finally, checking the energy weapon he'd acquired. Let's move. The corridor outside Crone's quarters was eerily quiet, the normal, bustling activity of the research station suspended during lockdown. They moved swiftly to the nearest maintenance access point, where Crone used his authority to override the security protocols. I'll make my way to the Environmental Control Center, the elder Ingis explained. Give me 20 minutes to get into position, then expect the distraction. That should give you approximately 12 minutes to reach the repository and begin the extraction before security regroups. And if you're caught, H1Z asked, then I will face the consequences of honoring our highest principles rather than our lowest instincts, Crone answered with dignity. Good fortune to you both. After Crone departed, Silene led H1Z to the storage bay where environmental suits were kept. The Ingis suits were not designed for human physiology, but one of the larger models could accommodate him with some adjustments. These crawlways weren't built for convenience, Silene warned as they sealed their helmets. They're narrow and wind around critical infrastructure. Some sections will require zero-gravity transit. I can handle it, H1Z assured her, though he had no conscious memory of spacewalking, like his combat skills. This knowledge seemed embedded somewhere beyond his explicit memory. The external maintenance network proved as challenging as Silene had warned. They navigated through claustrophobic passages, sometimes crawling, sometimes floating in sections where artificial gravity was absent. Through viewport panels, H1Z caught glimpses of the vast expanse of space and the swirling, gas-streaked surface of Zerka, 5 below. The massive yellow planet dominated the view, its turbulent atmosphere churning in endless storms. Why here? he asked during a brief rest at an intersection. Why build your research station in orbit around this particular planet? Zerka 5's magnetic field helps shield our more sensitive experiments from cosmic radiation, Silene explained. And its remote location, far from established trade routes and diplomatic outposts, ensured privacy. Privacy for crimes, H1Z observed bitterly. Silene's helmeted head dipped in what might have been acknowledgement. I cannot defend what was done. I can only try to help make it right. As they resumed their journey, H1Z found himself wondering about Silene's motivations. Was she genuinely motivated by ethical concerns, or was she, like Crone, pursuing some political advantage? The question became moot as they reached the final approach to the repository sector. According to schedule, Crone's distraction should begin any moment. They didn't have to wait long. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the station, different from the previous security alerts, more urgent and accompanied by flashing yellow indicators rather than red. Environmental emergency in command sectors. An automated voice announced in the Ingis language, which H1Z found he could understand despite never having studied it. All personnel evacuate to designated safety zones. This is not a drill. Through their suit comms, they heard the chaos unfolding. Security teams being diverted, panicked officers demanding explanations, evacuation protocols activating. Crone had delivered exactly as promised. Now's our chance, Silene urged. The repository access is through that airlock ahead. They cycled through the airlock into an antechamber, removing their helmets once atmosphere was confirmed. As predicted, the security presence at the repository entrance had thinned, with only 3 guards remaining, all looking distracted by the ongoing emergency. H1Z assessed the situation swiftly. I'll neutralize the guards. You override the door controls. Non-lethal takedowns only. Before Silene could respond, he was moving, crossing the distance to the first guard with astonishing speed. The Ingis barely had time to register the threat before H1Z delivered a precise strike to a neural cluster at the base of his neck, sending him collapsing to the floor. The second guard managed to activate his weapon, but H1Z was already inside his defensive perimeter, redirecting the energy pistol toward the ceiling where it discharged harmlessly before a similar strike rendered the guard unconscious. The third guard was more prepared, maintaining distance and firing rapidly. H1Z moved with inhuman agility, evading the energy bursts as he closed distance in an erratic pattern. A diving roll brought him to the guard's feet, and a sweeping kick toppled the Ingis to the ground where a final targeted strike ended the confrontation. Silene stared at him, mandibles slightly agape in what H1Z was beginning to recognize as the Ingis expression of shock. I've never seen anyone move like that, she said as she hurried to the door controls. Neither have I, H1Z replied grimly, gathering the guard's weapons. The fluid combat techniques emerging from his body felt as natural as breathing, yet he had no memory of learning them. Silene's technical expertise made short work of the security locks, and the massive doors to the clone repository slid open with a pneumatic hiss. What lay beyond stole H1Z's breath away. The chamber stretched at least 50 meters in each direction, its high ceiling lost in shadow. Lining the walls and filling the central floor space were hundreds of transparent pods, each containing a suspended human form identical to H1Z. Row after row, level after level of his own face, perfectly replicated, floating in nutrient solution with monitoring apparatus attached to vital points. By the ancestral stars, Silene whispered, her scientific detachment crumbling in the face of the operation's true scale. There must be 472, came a cold voice from behind them. H1Z whirled to find himself facing a tall, imposing Ingis in elaborate ceremonial garments that marked high scientific rank. Behind him stood 6 security officers with weapons drawn. Arch-scientist Euron, Silene identified him, unconsciously shrinking back. Junior scientist Silene, Euron acknowledged with evident disappointment. Your promising career ends today, I'm afraid. And you, he addressed H1Z directly, our most successful prototype. Your escape was most inconvenient, but perhaps educationally valuable. We've learned much about your capabilities in these past hours. I'm not your prototype, H1Z growled, hands tightening on his appropriated weapon. None of us are your property. You misunderstand your purpose, Euron said, spreading his long-fingered hands in what seemed a placating gesture. You are the salvation of the Indus race. For millennia, we have been trapped in evolutionary stasis, our minds unable to transcend established patterns of thought. But you, the hybrid consciousness we've engineered, represent our future. A future built on kidnapping, murder, and ethical violations, H1Z countered. How many humans died to create this project? A flicker of something, perhaps genuine regret, crossed Euron's features. The original acquisition team exceeded their parameters. The deaths were regrettable, but have served a greater purpose. And now, H1Z questioned, subtly shifting his stance to a more defensible position. What happens to all these clones? To me, you will be studied, of course. Your neural patterns mapped and replicated. Eventually, your genetic innovations will be integrated into our population through controlled reproduction programs. It is the most efficient path forward. And if we refuse, Euron's luminous eyes narrowed. Refuse? You speak as though these dormant vessels have consciousness or choice. They are potential, nothing more. In you are remarkable, certainly, but still a created being. Your purpose is defined by your creators. The word struck H1Z like physical blows. Despite everything he had learned, part of him had clung to the hope that perhaps his consciousness, his sense of self, had some legitimate claim to autonomy. Euron's casual dismissal of that possibility ignited something primal within him. You're wrong, he said, voice deadly quiet. Whatever you intended to create, what stands before you is a being with free will. And I choose freedom, for myself and for them. Before Euron could respond, the chamber was plunged into darkness as the station's primary power grid failed. The emergency lighting that flickered on seconds later cast everything in a dim red glow. Crone had apparently expanded his sabotage beyond the initial plan. In the momentary confusion, H1Z made his move. He fired precise shots at the security officers, aiming not to kill, but to disable their weapons and force them to take cover. Silene seized the opportunity to dash to the repository's central control console. I can initiate emergency revival protocols, she shouted over the chaos. But not for all of them. The system would overload. How many? H1Z called back, ducking behind a clone pod as energy burst from the regrouping guard streaked past. Maybe 20 at most. Do it, he commanded, laying down suppressing fire to keep the guards pinned while she worked. Euron had retreated to a defensive position near the entrance, barking orders into a communication device. Lock down the entire sector. No one enters or leaves. And give me a direct line to Overseer. Morton. The revival process began with a series of alarm tones as selected pods initiated rapid awakening sequences. The nutrient solution drained from the chambers, and mechanical arms removed monitoring equipment from the unconscious clones. I've prioritized the most physiologically stable specimens, Silene explained, fingers flying across the controls. But there's a problem. Their neural inhibitors are still active. They'll awaken in a controlled state, compliant to Inge's commands. Can you deactivate them? Not from here. Each inhibitor has an independent control circuit. H1Z made a quick decision. Keep them in stasis a little longer. I need to reach Euron's position. Using the pods as cover, H1Z circled through the chamber, exchanging fire with the guards while steadily advancing toward their leader. Euron, recognizing the threat, ordered his remaining security detail to form a protective cordon around him. You cannot win this confrontation, Euron called out. Even if you overcome my guards, the station's entire security force will converge here within minutes. There is nowhere for you to go. H1Z didn't bother responding. Instead, he calculated trajectories and timing, then executed a desperate maneuver, vaulting over a row of pods, firing precisely to force the guards to duck, and landing in a roll that brought him within striking distance of Euron himself. The arch-scientist proved more formidable than his academic title suggested. He deftly evaded H-1Z's initial strike and countered with a technique that suggested advanced combat training. They grappled briefly before H-1Z's enhanced reflexes gave him the advantage, allowing him to secure Euron in a restraining hold. "Call off your guards," H-1Z demanded, the energy pistol pressed against Euron's head. To the Inge's credit, he showed no fear. "You won't kill me. Your behavior patterns indicate strong ethical constraints against unnecessary lethal force." "You're right," H-1Z acknowledged. "But there's a lot of painful territory between here and death. The neural inhibitor controls. Where are they?" After a tense moment, Euron relented. "Central command module on my left wrist. Biometrically locked to my signature." "Silene," H-1Z called. "I need you here." As the Inge's scientist hurried over, the guards maintained their positions, weapons trained but unwilling to risk their leader's safety. "His wrist device controls the neural inhibitors," H-1Z explained. "Can you override it?" Silene examined the sophisticated equipment with professional interest. "I can't bypass the biometric lock without his cooperation, but there might be another way." She looked up at Euron. "The system must have an emergency release protocol. In case of catastrophic station failure, you wouldn't want 400 living beings trapped in artificially induced compliance, would you?" A muscle twitched in Euron's face. "That protocol requires command-level authorization." "Which you have," she pressed. "I will not," Euron began, but was interrupted by a new voice over the station-wide communication system. "This is Overseer Crone of the High Council Science Ethics Committee," the announcement echoed through the chamber. "All personnel be advised that I have initiated Article 7 of the Confederation Charter, declaring the Zerka 5 research station to be in violation of fundamental ethical principles. All security personnel are hereby ordered to stand down. All research subjects are declared autonomous beings with full rights under Confederation law." Euron's face contorted with rage. "Crone doesn't have the authority. This is insurrection." The announcement continued. "To ensure compliance, I have transferred station control codes to an independent system. If these orders are not followed within 5 minutes, I will initiate a controlled decompression of all command and security quarters." The guards exchanged uncertain glances, their weapons wavering. "He's bluffing," Euron insisted. "Crone is a theorist, an idealist. He would never risk Inge's lives." "Are you willing to bet your life on that?" H-1Z asked quietly. "And the lives of your crew? Release the inhibitors, Euron. This experiment is over." Whether it was self-preservation or recognition of the inevitable, something in Euron finally yielded. With H-1Z maintaining his restraining hold, the arch-scientist reluctantly pressed his palm to the wrist device and vocalized a complex authorization code. Immediately, status indicators throughout the chamber shifted from red to green. Inhibitor network deactivated. The system confirmed in automated Inge's language. "Now the revival process," H-1Z insisted. "All viable specimens." "That's insanity," Euron protested. "The life support systems can't handle sudden activation of hundreds of new occupants. You'll crash the entire station's environmental controls." "Then we'd better find a way off this station quickly," H-1Z replied coldly. "Silene can. You initiate a phased revival. Groups small enough for the systems to handle." She was already at the controls. "I can sequence them in batches of 50, spaced 15 minutes apart. The first group is already completing their awakening cycle." As if on cue, the pods nearest the central platform began to open, their occupants, identical to H-1Z in every physical detail, stirring to consciousness. Unlike his own awakening, theirs appeared gradual, confused, their eyes blinking against the emergency lighting as they struggled to orient themselves. "They'll need guidance," H-1Z said, maintaining his hold on your own, and clothing supplies. Storage units in the adjacent preparation chamber, Silene informed him, dividing her attention between the awakening clones and the monitoring systems. But we have another problem. Station security protocols are engaging countermeasures against Crone's override. We have perhaps 20 minutes before they regain control of critical systems. The first fully awakened clone stumbled from his pod, naked and disoriented, but already showing signs of the same accelerated adaptation H1Z had displayed. He looked around, gaze settling on H1Z with an expression of profound confusion. Who? What am I? He asked, voice identical to H1Z's. You're free. H1Z answered simply. And we're leaving. Can you help the others? The clone nodded, something clicking into place behind his eyes. The same analytical processing, the same instinctive understanding of priorities. Without further questions, he moved to assist the next awakening clone. Euron watched this exchange with scientific fascination overriding his political concerns. Remarkable, he murmured. The neural pathways are stabilizing much faster than our models predicted. The shared baseline consciousness seems to facilitate accelerated integration. This isn't a laboratory observation, H1Z growled, tightening his grip. These are living beings you've created. Created for a purpose, Euron insisted. A noble purpose that could elevate both our species. Their argument was interrupted by a violent shudder that ran through the entire station, knocking several of them off balance. The emergency lighting flickered ominously. What was that? H1Z demanded. Silene frantically checked the status displays. Structural integrity breach in the engineering section. Someone's fired on the station from outside. Impossible, Euron scoffed. No ships are scheduled to arrive for 3 cycles, and our defense systems would have detected any approach. Another impact rocked the station, more violent than the first. Alarm klaxons blared with renewed urgency. Alert! Critical damage to primary power couplings, announced the automated system. Station orbital decay commencing. Estimated time to atmospheric entry, 47 minutes. H1Z's mind raced through the implications. Someone doesn't want this project exposed. They're trying to destroy the evidence, destroy us all. Preposterous. Euron sputtered. No Ingis would. Overseer Morden would, Silene interrupted, face pale with realization. If he thought the project was compromised beyond recovery, he'd rather destroy it than let it be exposed. His political survival depends on it. A third impact sent several awakening clones tumbling from their pods. Status indicators throughout the chamber shifted to critical red. We need to evacuate, H1Z decided. Silene, what's our best escape option? The executive shuttle bay, she answered without hesitation. 2 levels down. The vessels there have independent navigation systems and sufficient capacity for perhaps 80 passengers. Not nearly enough, H1Z observed grimly, looking at the hundreds of pods. The main evacuation ships in the primary bay could handle the rest, she added, but they require command authorization to launch. H1Z turned his attention back to Euron. It seems you have a choice, arch-scientist. Help us evacuate everyone, or die with your experiment. Euron's luminous eyes narrowed to slits. And if I assist you, what then? Where do these clones go? Who would they become? They have no identity, no purpose beyond what we designed. They'll find their own purpose, H1Z stated with quiet conviction. As will I. Before Euron could respond, the repository doors slid open, and Overseer Crone stumbled in, supported by 2 security officers wearing armbands that indicated loyalty to his faction. Morden has gone mad, Crone gasped, clearly injured but mobile. He's ordered the station destroyed rather than let the project be exposed. He's already fled on his personal transport. With what evidence? H1Z demanded. None that matters now, Crone replied. I've transmitted everything, the human abduction, the illegal experiments, all of it, to the High Council and to Earth diplomatic channels. The truth is out. Now we must focus on survival. Euron seemed to deflate, his posture slumping in. Defeat as his life's work collapsed around him. "I was so close," he murmured. "Another decade of refinement, and we could have evolved beyond our limitations." "There are other paths to evolution," Crone told him with unexpected gentleness. "Ones that don't require sacrificing our ethical foundation." With Euron's resistance broken, they quickly organized an evacuation plan. H-1Z and the first awakened clones took charge of guiding the newly revived, while Silene and Crone's loyalists secured the escape route to the shuttle base. Euron, under Gar, provided the necessary command authorizations to unlock the evacuation ships. As they hurried through the corridors of the disintegrating station, H-1Z found himself running alongside Silene, who was coordinating evacuation routes through her communication device. "Why did you help me?" he asked during a brief lull. "From the beginning, you could have reported me, but you chose to help." Silene's gaze remained focused ahead, but her response was thoughtful. "Among my people, there's a philosophical concept called unza, the recognition of personhood beyond form. When I saw you in that corridor, I recognized a person, not an experiment." The rest followed naturally. They reached the main evacuation bay to find chaotic scenes of Inge's personnel scrambling to board the massive ships. With the station's imminent destruction now undeniable, previous political divisions seemed forgotten in the rush to escape. "We need to split up," H-1Z told Silene. "I'll lead my brothers to the executive shuttles as planned. Can you ensure these ships launch safely?" "Yes," she confirmed. "But what about after? Where will you go?" It was a question H-1Z had been avoiding. As a created being with no past, no legal identity, and hundreds of identical copies, the future was a blank page filled with complications. "First survive, then decide," he answered pragmatically. "The clones will need time to develop individual identities, memories. Earth will want explanations," Silene warned. "Once they learn of your existence, of all of you, they'll have questions, demands. Then we'll negotiate from a position of freedom, not captivity," H-1Z stated. Crone transmitted the evidence. "The Inge's Confederation will be forced to acknowledge what happened here, make reparations." Another violent shudder ran through the station, more ominous than the previous impacts. Structural supports groaned audibly as the orbital decay accelerated. "Go," Silene urged. "Get your people to safety. I'll ensure these ships launch once fully boarded." H-1Z hesitated, feeling an unexpected connection to this alien who had risked everything to help him. "Come with us," he offered impulsively. "Your position here is compromised. The political fallout is something I must face," she interrupted gently. "My place is with my people, helping them understand what happened here, ensure it never happens again." Recognizing the truth in her words, H-1Z nodded. "Then I hope we meet again under better circumstances." "As do I, H-1Z, she replied, then corrected herself. "Or whatever name you choose for yourself going forward." That thought, the freedom to name himself, struck H-1Z with unexpected force. He hadn't considered that fundamental aspect of identity yet. With a final nod to Silene, he led his group of awakened clones toward the executive shuttle bay. The corridors were increasingly unstable, with structural panels coming loose and atmospheric pressure fluctuating as the station's integrity failed. They reached the shuttle bay to find Crone directing the boarding process with remarkable efficiency despite his injuries. Nearly 60 clones, all at various stages of awakening consciousness, had already been loaded onto the 3 available shuttles. "We're ready for final boarding," Crone informed H-1Z. "These vessels are programmed for an automated course to the Confederation's diplomatic outpost in the Procyon system. From there, arrangements can be made for your people." "And your own?" H-1Z asked, noticing the arch-scientist was not among those present. "Chose to remain with his research," Crone replied solemnly. "Some convictions run too deep to abandon, even in the face of death." The station lurched again, emergency lighting failing completely before backup systems engaged. They had minutes at most. You should board now, H1Z told Crone. Your testimony will be crucial in what follows. The elder Ingis shook his head. My duty requires I remain until the final evacuation ship departs. Besides, he added with grim humor, I am too old to begin a new life as a fugitive from my own government. They'll hold you responsible, H1Z warned. Some burdens must be carried, Crone replied philosophically. Now go. Your path lies elsewhere. As H1Z boarded the lead shuttle, the final group of clones settling into acceleration couches around him, he took one last look at the disintegrating station through the viewport. This place of his creation, of his captivity and liberation, would soon be nothing but debris burning in Zerka 5's turbulent atmosphere. The shuttle's automated systems engaged, the bay doors opening to reveal the vast starscape beyond. As they cleared the station's docking clamps, H1Z watched dozens of evacuation ships streaming away in all directions, a diaspora born of desperation and revelation. Their own 3 shuttles formed a tight formation, accelerating rapidly from the doomed station. Through the rear viewport, H1Z witnessed the final structural collapse as the massive facility broke apart, sections tearing free as gravitational forces overcame failing integrity fields. Inside the shuttle cabin, the awakened clones watched in silence, some still disoriented, others beginning to show the first signs of diverging personalities despite their identical appearances. One of the first awakened approached H1Z, his expression troubled. What happens now? Who are we supposed to be? It was the fundamental question, the one H1Z himself had been grappling with since consciousness. But seeing it reflected in another's identical face somehow clarified his thinking. We're whoever we choose to become, he answered. We have the same starting point, the same body, perhaps even similar instincts. But from this moment, each choice we make shapes us in a different people. But we have no memories, no past, objected another clone. Then we build a future instead, H1Z replied. One decision at a time. As the shuttles accelerated to superluminal velocity, leaving the Zerka system behind, H1Z gazed out at the stretching starfield. 30 seconds. That's all it had taken from his first moment of consciousness to his first act of rebellion. 30 seconds that had triggered the collapse of an unethical research program, exposed a diplomatic deception, and freed hundreds of newly created beings. What might they accomplish given a lifetime of such choices? The stars streaked past, possibilities unfolding like the infinite paths of light stretching before them. H1Z, who would soon choose a true name for himself, felt a profound sense of potential that transcended his artificial origins. He was neither human nor Ingis, neither natural nor wholly engineered. He existed in the space between established categories, and in that uncharted territory lay a unique kind of freedom. In the cabin behind him, his identical brothers were already beginning their own journeys of self-discovery. Some spoke quietly among themselves, others sat in contemplative silence, while a few explored their surroundings with curious intensity. Despite their identical genetics, their consciousness was already diverging, proof that identity transcended physical form. As Zerka 5 disappeared from the shuttle's sensors, H1Z considered the irony of the Ingis experiment. In seeking to overcome their own evolutionary plateau through genetic manipulation, they had inadvertently created beings who embodied a different kind of evolution, one based not on biological imperatives, but on conscious choice. The shuttle's navigation system chimed, confirming their course to the Procyon diplomatic outpost. What reception awaited them there? H1Z couldn't predict. Would they be welcomed as refugees? Studied as curiosities? Feared as potential threats? Perhaps all three. Whatever came next, one thing was certain. They would face it as free beings making their own choices. Their stories had begun in captivity, but they would continue in freedom. That was worth any uncertainty the future might hold. H1Z turned from the viewport to address his waiting brothers. It was time to begin the process of becoming individuals, of transforming from identical copies into unique persons. The journey would be challenging, possibly dangerous, but infinitely preferable to the controlled existence that had been planned for them. "We have approximately 6 hours before we reach the outpost," he told them. "Let's use that time to decide who we want to be when we arrive." As discussions began throughout the cabin, names considered, aspirations voiced, differences embraced, H1Z reflected on the remarkable journey that had begun with those first 30 seconds of consciousness. From exploitation had come liberation. From a designed purpose had come self-determination. It wasn't just a clone that had escaped in 30 seconds. It was an entire future, unplanned, unpredictable, and gloriously free. The stars continued their silent witness as the shuttles carried their unique cargo toward an unwritten destiny, a new evolution taking its first tentative steps into the vast possibility of existence. In those quiet moments between stars, surrounded by voices that mirrored his own yet spoke increasingly different thoughts, H1Z finally answered the question that had driven him since awakening. Who am I? Not merely a copy, not simply a creation, but a being defined by choices beginning with that first, crucial choice to break free. And in that understanding came a profound peace that transcended the circumstances of his creation. The journey ahead was uncertain, but it was his to navigate. Theirs to navigate, each in their own way. As Zerka, 5, faded into the distance behind them, so too did the identities that had been imposed upon them. What lay ahead was uncharted, a future limited only by their courage to imagine it. H1Z smiled at the thought. 30 seconds to escape, a lifetime to become.